Welcome to the AI Adoption Podcast. And on this episode, I'm very pleased to welcome Dr. Alexandra Dobra-Kiel from an advertising agency, Behave. Now, Alexandra is going to be talking about the adoption of AI, and she makes some very interesting insights and observations. For instance, in her view, there is a big difference between the adoption of AI and the implementation of AI. Because from her perspective, adoption means making sure that people in the organization are brought along with the implementation of AI. Whereas if organizations simply deploy AI and don't bring the people around, in her view, the benefits are simply not going to be realized. I think Alexandra has a huge amount of knowledge and insight to provide in this area, and I hope you will enjoy it. Alexandra, welcome to the AI Adoption Podcast. It's a pleasure to have you here today. I wondered if we could maybe begin by you giving listeners a little bit of background about yourself and about Behave.
Sure. Thank you, Ashley, and it's a pleasure to be on this podcast too. So I'm Alexandra, and I'm the Innovation and Strategy Director at Serviceplan Group, where I lead strategic innovation across Behave in the UK and future marketing in Germany. Behave, as the name might indicate, is a behavioral science consultancy, future marketing being a strategy consultancy. And I also serve on the Advertising Association AI Task Force, where we help shape the industry's response to AI and support the UK's global competitiveness in the space.
Okay, thank you. Alexandra, just thinking about AI adoption, which is the theme of this podcast, what are some of the factors that you think will affect AI adoption in workplaces?
So I would start by saying that actually I absolutely love the focus on adoption, simply because we make at Behave a clear distinction between adoption and implementation. Mm-hmm. A lot of companies we're seeing are rushing into implementation and treat AI as just another technology, whereas adoption is really about taking the people with you, because AI is not just another technology tool. And to answer your question, I think it comes down to a few factors. The first one is around your corporate culture. Do you have a culture of psychological safety? In other words, do you have a culture that encourages experimentation, openness towards change, and risk-taking? Or actually, are you stifled with comfort? The second aspect is really around leadership. And in particular, does leadership mimic and exemplify vulnerability? AI is imperfect, just as humans are actually. And leaders must really publicly use and even stumble with AI to normalize these imperfections. But that takes the courage of vulnerability. Then we need strategic clarity. Because too many companies want AI for the sake of wanting AI, or want AI because AI can solve everything. That's not the case. You still need a strategy as with everything else. And that clarity would also clearly define whether you have a return on investment or not. And then ethics, ethical ownership in particular. We ran a study of more than 1,200 C-suites and employees earlier this year. And our study revealed actually that there is what I call an ethical vacuum. C-suites and employees alike are very split around who should be in charge of the ethics of AI. And that obviously, until it is solved, can also affect AI adoption. But what I will end up saying is that AI adoption isn't about training, because we hear a lot of companies that, just invest in training over training. It's really about redesigning work, redesigning value around human limitations, but also strengths, and around AI's limitations and strengths.
So given that AI is going to drive a significant amount of change, which is what I think you're you're suggesting here. How should organizations motivate employees to engage with AI? Because it can be quite threatening.
It is very threatening indeed. And to come back to our study, 77% of employees have expressed an anxiety regarding AI taking their jobs. And it's not just our research that shows it. Almost every single survey out there shows the exact same fear. This is why motivation is absolutely key. But then how can you motivate someone to use the very tool that might make him redundant? Mm-hmm. And this is where I think that companies need to move beyond buy-in. That is the sort of corporate jargon of every big change management program. But here it is really about how do you ensure that you have a culture that treats employees with dignity? Because it is that dignity that is absolutely essential in terms of acknowledging the fear of your employees, but also rewarding learning and not just output. Because you will have some experiments around some jobs being re-engineered around AI that might not necessarily go in the right direction, but the learnings from that should be embraced.
And I mean, this notion of motivation and getting employees and getting workers motivated to use AI. I know in the past when we've spoken, you've used the phrase deep motivation. I wondered if you could just unpack that idea for us, please.
Sure. For me, deep motivation goes back to what we see also in the literature around that intrinsic motivation, because obviously you can motivate employees because you give them perks, bonuses, etc., to use AI or whatever. But intrinsic motivation is really about how can you bring them to the table to redesign their jobs so that they are resilient in the future, because it is what will also trigger that deep motivation, the fact that they're a stakeholder in the decision affecting the future look of their jobs.
And when we're talking about jobs, clearly one of the issues with AI in the workplace is the concern that the number of jobs are going to decrease. Mm-hmm. Can boards genuinely promise that there won't be a reduction in the workforce in their organizations?
No, and neither should they promise that. For a variety of reasons. The first reason being macroeconomics that are completely outside of the control of companies. The second reason is, simply the competitive structure in which they are. If your direct competitors are starting to let go of 30% of the workforce and of not having certain jobs anymore, I don't think that you can afford to keep those jobs, because it's a clear signal about them being just redundant, not adding value. But this requires a honest dialogue. And before even you start having that honest dialogue with your employees, what you really need as a board is to have a vision about what exactly do you want to achieve with AI and how do you want to achieve it. And from that point onwards, you start to have that dialogue with your workforce, because obviously AI is changing the value creation capacity of jobs, and we need to have that honesty around it. And it is not just about AI will take our boring jobs. It is beyond just that. And it is that beyond just that is really, freaking out employees and boards alike.
Yeah, and I guess clearly there is a concern about jobs, but what about jobs being created? Will there be new opportunities for workers, for people working in organizations, do you think?
Absolutely. I mean, for every single big technological change cycle throughout history, we have seen that there has been job destruction, but also job creation. Mm-hmm. And usually job creation has outpaced job destruction. Now, I don't know exactly what these jobs will be. because I'm not in the field of astrology and prediction. But I am absolutely sure that there will be jobs being created that probably span beyond our current imaginative capacity.
Yeah, and in some ways, that issue about what these jobs are going to be in the future is one of the big, I think, one of the big unknowns. But yeah, as you say, virtually every phase of technology has created new jobs, yeah, that we haven't even begun to design yet.
Absolutely.
You mentioned a bit earlier around ethics and that boards need to really understand what the ethical issues are, but also where that whole area of ethical, responsible, transparent AI rests and where that lies within the organization. So how do you think senior managers can balance these these sometimes conflicting demands? Because on the one hand, you've got the need to be ethical and ensure there's transparency, but equally on the other hand, there's the deployment or there's the adoption of AI, which means not everybody's going to get what they want necessarily. What are your thoughts in terms of balancing those?
It is a tough balancing act, but I think that it is a tough one also because we conflate ethics with compliance. Compliance, to an extent, is really not the best approach to AI transparency and ethics, simply because AI is evolving so quickly that it cannot be put into this is correct, this is wrong, and don't do that, do this. I think that there are two non-negotiables. The first one is to demystify AI, because we still have this tendency to have this mysticism around, right? Not really explaining why we use it or using a lot of jargon around. That means that a lot of employees and users don't understand what it's for. So it starts with us and having the sort of humility to demystify AI. And then I think that a critical factor is critical thinking. In particular, ethics is not just the job of one department or one committee. It is the job of every single employee, just as it is now in the absence of AI adoption at scale. But AI requires teams to be trained in the Socratic method, which is essentially a system of discipline, of questioning your own assumptions when using something or when receiving the output of an AI tool. So it's really about questioning, where do I need to challenge my own assumptions? But also what data might be missing. Is it going to harm anyone, etc. So yes, I would really insist on that training on critical thinking. And a red flag to me would be a company that has this ethics committees in place that meet every 3 months, because bias evolves live and over time. 3 months is too late.
Yeah, because in some ways those models evolve, and with that, the actual nature of the business may well also evolve. How do you think AI is likely to change business models?
That's the $1 million question, because in our companies themselves, we're actually thinking about, okay, how do we build consulting 2.0, which essentially means consulting for the AI age. We've seen a lot of business models evolving through AI because they really focused on efficiency. But that is not the most interesting story of AI. I think that what we're starting to see as well beyond efficiency is business models that shift from selling products to selling living services. So in the past, you might have bought software. Great, you owned it for life, but actually that wasn't really evolving with your needs. And related to that, it's that idea that you have business models that shift from the ownership, you own a product or a service, to access to a suite of constant live updates, to a suite of predictions that just increase the value of what you get at the end of the day. And beyond that, I would say that we need to go back to first principles and ask the question to boards, leaders, and employees: if AI was to erase our revenue streams tomorrow, what human capability would customers still pay us for? Because I think that's quite key to also decipher a bit how business models will change.
I mean, that notion about what customers will pay for, very often customers don't appreciate a service until either it's taken away from them, or they don't realize they need a service till something is offered to them, and then they go, "Oh yeah, that's really good. I wouldn't. I'll take some of that, and be willing to pay for it." How can companies begin to spot these opportunities? I particularly like the idea of consulting 2.0. I mean, how do companies actually start to spot some of these opportunities from your perspective, Alexandra?
Yes, I think that, with a risk of repeating myself, I think that companies really need to go back to basic principles because there is a lot of noise out there. And I think that the immediate tendency, especially in an environment of noise and uncertainty, is to want to do everything quickly. And to expand the portfolio of what you can offer so that you hedge your bets. And that's not what companies should do, or at least most companies should do. I think that it is now time for companies to take big bets. Yes, there is a risk involved in it, but equally it is the time for companies to move to let go of the bureaucratic tendencies that we've seen over the past 20 years or more, and to really spring into the territory of creativity, imagination. And I think that actually, in that respect, companies that are in the advertising and media industry have an edge because they have been much more exposed, not just to AI, but to the changes imposed by customers than classic management consultancies or other industries.
And just sticking with then the companies that are in the advertising sector for a moment, how do you see business models evolving in your sector?
What we see is that so for a long time the success story was around consolidation. And now we see that actually there is a bit of a move away from that, because with AI, you no longer need 2,000 employees to have scale. AI can do that for you. So that's the first one. Consolidation is not anymore of a recipe for success. The second is also that clarity. Organizational clarity, but also clarity around what value you propose is becoming much more stringent. And then imagination, being bold, that is also becoming much more part of the industry, because obviously the industry always had creativity, but for some time that creativity has been a bit commoditized, and it was creativity in name, but not necessarily in practice.
Yeah, and I guess AI allows companies to generate that value in many different ways. What changes are you seeing in how companies are coming around to deliver value to their clients?
The first one would be just the speed, which, I mean, in the past it took weeks to gather all the data, etc., and then to analyze it, etc. All of that has been sped up with AI. The second value that it provides is much more around a modular approach. in the past, the big mantra was we come with this massive change project and it takes, 1 year or more. Now it is much more modular, and that modularity also ensures that we take into account much more the maturity level of the client in different sections of its business, and we only change or provide value where it is needed. There is no need to change something for the sake of changing, as it was done in the past.
And so, in terms of a company's maturity, and how would you assess an organization's maturity, whether in terms of AI or even just its digital maturity?
So we do have, within our company, but it's also other companies, I'm sure, we have some sophisticated auditing capability in order to assess the digital and AI maturity of companies. And that also looks not just at, what is the sort of hype thing that you can do with AI, but it also takes into account the sort of governance infrastructure that sits below it. Around data security, data compliance, etc. Because obviously we operate also in a regulated environment, and we need to take that into account. And the maturity of a company is also reflected in whether it took those governance aspects into account or not.
It's really interesting when working with organizations. I know that through the work I've done with businesses, when it comes to maturity, there's either a view that we are way ahead of everybody, Ashley, you don't need to worry. And then you find when you take them through one of these assessments that actually their maturity level is nowhere near where they perceive their maturity level to be. Or you find them the other way where they go, oh, no, we're really behind. And actually they are fairly mature as an organization. How do you manage that perceptions gap when you come across it?
It's we do also have a service and a product around psychological safety, which is really focused on humility, vulnerability. And one way to manage that perception gap is really to instill that sense of humility and vulnerability and examination as well. And I won't say that it is always easy, but those three words of humility, examination, vulnerability tend to resonate quite well with leaders, because at the end of the day, no leader can pretend to be able to provide and drive growth in the absence of those.
Yeah. True. I guess one of the opportunities then when people talk about AI, and you've touched on this previously in this conversation, and that is around AI coming in to bring in efficiencies, particularly operational efficiencies. How can organizations kind of innovate while they are delivering these operational efficiencies? Are there examples that you've come across in terms of the work that you're doing?
Yes, although I would say that there are not enough efficiencies that are being currently driven. And I would say that one of the reasons behind it is just the human bottleneck to efficiency and value creation, because we tend to use AI to prop old ways of working, old models, rather than inventing new ones. And for efficiency to really be efficient, just propping up old models is missing the mark. But I see a lot of self-sabotage patterns in companies. The first one is around the boring task trap. Okay, AI will do the boring task. Okay. Maybe a better question should be, why do we have so many boring tasks in the first place? Does it even make sense to leave them to AI? But there is also another aspect that I think we all too often overlook. Amongst what we call the boring tasks, there are tasks that are necessary to our learning curve. Even when we went to school, there were things that you would learn because you repeated it. And if we take out all the so-called boring tasks, then it might actually affect our ability to learn. The second trap that I see is ego-driven resistance. I'm the expert, and AI cannot really do it. And of course, that is not always the case. We've seen in medicine, but not only in medicine, where AI was better to diagnose cancer and other issues than the human. And there is also the incrementalism trap. We would use AI, but in that sort of little way, to just have 5% off in terms of logistic costs or whatever. And these three traps mean that I have not yet seen enough of value creation and efficiency amongst companies.
And I really like your three traps. And I've seen a number of organizations get caught in one or more of those, I have to say. But one of the concerns, I guess, as well, is that very often, particularly in that first trap, the boring, mundane trap of work, there is a concern increasingly, and I hear this from policymakers, I hear this from parents. In fact, I think even earlier today, I read a report saying that the number of jobs for graduates are going down, because a lot of these kind of boring jobs, these first-tier jobs, are now being done by AI. I mean, do you see that maybe if I look forward, how will people coming into the industry kind of learn and develop those base level skills?
It's a very important question, and that is actually a worry for me, because whilst we might go for the low-hanging fruit of cutting costs now by not hiring graduates anymore, or just slashing by 50% the graduate intake, we don't seem to think about the resilience of our economies in the future. What do you have? Cohorts and generations of graduates who couldn't find a job and float around in the economy without providing any value to it. That's lost generations, and it makes absolutely no sense. And we have seen it to an extent at a much lower scale during the COVID times, because during the pandemic, obviously everyone was at home, and there are a number of things, especially as a young grad, that you learn by observing, and that observational method of learning was stripped out because you were no longer into the office. And we have seen some of the economic damages of that on organizations. And now we seem to repeat this mistake again, but at a wider scale, with AI replacing these jobs that, quite honestly, were not even that costly. So if you really want to reduce cost, you can do it somewhere else.
Yes, that is one that I think is causing policymakers, certainly from the conversations I'm having, a significant amount of concern. Which I guess takes me to the boardroom and how some of these decisions, particularly related to AI adoption, are going to be taken. So if I were to take you out of this interview, Alexandra, and put you into a boardroom, and the board members turned at you and said, so what should we be prioritizing in terms of AI adoption? What would you say to that, to a board of an organization?
I think that I will really start by saying that stop automating, start augmenting. So I think that we need to stop fixating on efficiency and a very myopic definition of efficiency. And we need to start focusing on imagining what's now and what's next. But for that, you need to define your North Star. For that, it means that you need to have a clear vision about what you want and how you want to get there. The second is that you need a talent reboot. And talent reboot doesn't mean that we get rid of graduates and we just have bots in place. A talent reboot is really about hiring for AI orchestration, but also because what you need is your workforce, regardless of the department they are part of, to really come as an orchestra together. And that is a skill that is very difficult to put in place, but it is also a habit that is difficult to put in place, because out of a myopic vision around efficiency, most organizations are built around silos, because it is much easier to manage silos than an orchestra. And the third one is around governance. Governance can mean growth. And by governance, I don't mean compliance at all. I'm quite allergic to that, as you probably gathered. But it's really about the governance that propels growth, because you audit AI systems frequently in order to identify what are the missed opportunities, but also what are, the sort of biases, etc., that you did accept and that shouldn't be acceptable.
Alexandra, thank you for the time you've taken to join us today on the AI Adoption Podcast. You've provided some really interesting insights into, particularly I like the difference that you made between AI adoption and AI implementation. And I think that's a really insightful way of coming to AI, and for organizations to come to AI. So thank you once again, and I look forward to staying in touch.
Thank you, Ashley. It was a pleasure, and the questions have all been very thoughtful, so they really helped me spark my own thinking around the topic. So thank you.